Hey everyone, I got an exciting returning guest, somebody I like to talk to every month because he puts out this summary video about Vegas. And after he does it, I got to call him and get him on the channel. How you doing, Bryan Lebo?
Great. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing very well. I got to tell you, when I clicked on your little video, I said, okay, time to watch. I'm like, oh my God, is Vegas going to do it again? And Vegas did it again. It broke the record, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think we both kind of reached this point where it's fair game. Anything is possible.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, you look at before every bust, there's a massive run up. It rarely does it like start to meander, and then it's usually a head and then a serendipitous plummet. So I think to some degree, we're kind of in that zone, but I am starting to see things mellow out a little bit, and it's a little bit difficult to determine whether it's that time of year versus people sobering up going, hey, okay, well, maybe this doesn't make so much sense. And in my conversations with people, it's kind of like a mixed bag. I mean, some people see what we're seeing, but what's strange is even some of these people that see what we're seeing still don't care.
Wow.
I mean, I put a $1.3 million home in escrow, closed that one, a $1.7 million home in escrow. That one's currently in escrow. And it's not that my clients are ignorant, and I've told them what I believe.
Yeah.
But between interest rates being low and just kind of a laissez-faire, like, whatever attitude, people just don't really seem to be that concerned in general.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the record. I forget. It was 325. Now it's 328, or was it 328? Now it's 331. I forget.
Yeah, so we were at 325 the month before, and then last month we ended up at $328,000.
Wow, so so roughly a 1%, roughly.
Yeah, it was basically 0.9% over the previous month. To give you an idea, though, from last year we were at 303,000. So year over year, that's 8.3%.
Wow.
I mean, in any world, an 8.3% annual increase is
what was it?
Huge.
Do you have it up in front of you? I see you clicking around. Is it up in front of you? Do you know what it was in April?
This April or last April?
This April, like 5 months ago or whenever.
Yeah, this April we were at 309,000.
So yeah, so let's call it 310 to 330. Yeah, that's still 7%.
Yeah, I mean.
Wow. Okay. All right. So that was the headline number. Vegas up. I'll call it 1% for rounding. Month on month, June to July. We're now in the middle of August. Then you did this great thing you've done, I think, 3 months in a row now, where you're breaking down categories. I think it's below 250, 250, 500, 500, a million, a million. I don't know what it is, but you have a bunch of ranges.
Yeah.
And net is still low inventory, high demand. Is that kind of the net?
Yeah. So basically kind of where we're at is, kind of two different subjects, right? The inventory was a massive situation that we were dealing with because the inventory was rapidly depleting coming out of inventory. So, or coming out of quarantine. So I've got the numbers there. So, you could see once we went into quarantine, all of a sudden, our inventory just massively started changing. And then once we came out of quarantine, it was just plummeting. People just came out purchasing so strong that we started with, 6,000 homes, and then we ended, in July with just under 5,000 homes. So, I mean, we really depleted a tremendous amount of inventory. Last time I checked, it was a 16% decline since COVID. But what I've seen now for 5 weeks in a row, our inventory has, I would say, plateaued. It's gone up incrementally. We're talking 20, 60 homes, nothing really moving the needle, but it does show that things are stabilizing from an inventory standpoint.
That's interesting. Lots of stuff there. And the one that I want to talk about first when I watched your excellent video was your top bracket. That's $1.5 million and above, right?
Yeah. So let me pull that up.
Yeah.
So continue with what you're going to say.
Yeah. The reason I wanted to go there, and you just talked about putting a $1.6 million house in contract in 1.7. I'm curious, is Vegas like other markets where those people are typically just paying cash? Or do you know?
I mean, no. It depends at levels, right? Once you get well over 1.5, we're talking 2 million plus,
Okay.
then you see a really high propensity of cash buyers.
Okay.
You know, Vegas, really that breaking point's around 3 million.
Uh-huh.
Once you're 3 million, like pretty much everything's cash. That's a very, 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 very different level. That's not rich, that's wealth.
Okay.
Very, very different.
Yeah.
You know, and you kind of have, you know, the luxury market is, you know, somewhere around 800 to 1.5.
Okay.
And then the real luxury is that 1.5 now to 3 million.
Okay.
But once you get over 3, that's when things drastically change. Yeah.
Okay.
But what I was trying to make a point was that you can understand whatever happens on the lower end because you're dealing with less sophisticated buyers, less people looking at their portfolios, just a very different type of mentality between someone looking for a $300,000 home versus someone over 1.5 million.
For sure.
And knowing what we know and seeing what we see, you know, I would have thought there would have been a tremendous amount of trepidation on the high end wealth. You know, when you see what, you know, Warren Buffett is doing, and when you see what the owner of the Golden Knights is doing, you know, owns Fidelity Capital. You know, he just set up a $1.2 billion undetermined hedge fund to purchase assets unknown. You can see these guys are gearing up. So I would have thought that the high end of the market would have been much more conservative. But in reality, you know, we went from 11% saturation to 16% saturation. Every month, more and more homes are being absorbed in that ultra luxury high end, which tells you.
Yeah, I wonder, again, this is all new to us, right? Nobody has ever invested in a pandemic before. So this is all new. Even though you and I have 2 decades of experience in our markets, it's the first time for you and I investing in a pandemic. So we're trying to figure it out. I'm curious if the sophisticated buyers, which I'll just genericize as 1.5 and above, I wonder if they're looking at asset preservation. The reason I mean that is we've clearly had a V-shaped recovery in the stock market where Main Street, Vegas included, very different. No V-shaped recovery, still 20% unemployment. Maybe these folks are looking at their stock portfolios going, this can't go on forever. Let me exit some of that. Let me get some ultra cheap 30-year money at 3%, you know, maybe put 50% down so I'm not over leveraged. I mean, if that's what they're doing, I'm not saying that's what they're doing, but I can see that. That makes sense, right?
Yeah, I mean, in the case of my recent buyer, you know, this guy's 1.7 million. He's got assets well exceeding that amount. He could easily write a check. Obviously, that, you know, ties up a lot of capital that he couldn't use for investments. But he ended up taking a 10-year ARM and got something like, I think it was like 2.5%, because he's like, I'm never going to be here more than 10 years. I'm either going to buy something bigger or it's going to get paid off. Yeah. But at 2.5%, why not? How can I turn the money down? I can use that money to do anything else to generate. I mean, playing that margin, right? Yeah. I only have to beat 2.5%. I mean,
score.
I could. I mean, it's like throwing a rock in the ocean. I mean, how can I not beat that performance?
You could buy dividend stocks and beat 2.5%.
Exactly. So, I mean, here's a guy buying a $1.7 million home, and he's like, no, I'm going to take the cheap money and use the rest of the money to invest.
Makes total sense.
You know, very, very different things going on.
Yeah. And then the other thing I was starting to pontificate last month, and I'm curious if you're seeing it more this month, because last month might have been too early, is I'm wondering if you're seeing even a higher propensity of out-of-state buyers coming to Vegas.
Yeah. You know, I've got a ton of calls and interest from people that are out of state. And, you know, I had one person from New York the other day. You know, you always have California. I spent Monday and Tuesday with clients that were relocating from Southern California. He had been thinking about doing this for quite some time, but this was just kind of the straw that broke the camel's back, where he's like, okay, we've been thinking about it. I'm done. I'm tapped out. And we spent some time, and he's like, you know what? Like, I can't believe I didn't think to do this earlier. Most people don't realize what it's like off the strip, way off the strip.
Yeah.
And once you get into suburbia, which again, you know, by all metrics, everyone's kind of fleeing the city at this moment. Mm-hmm. And, you know, if you're spending all this time at home, you want a more spacious home, something more comfortable.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you come to Las Vegas and you see Green Valley and you see Summerlin and you realize the quality of life, and coming from places like Los Angeles, where there's so much density and traffic and bullshit, when you come here and you see just how easy life is, but yet you still have access to so many amenities.
Yeah.
A lot of people are going, you know what? I'm done with California. I'm done paying the taxes.
Yeah.
So
I think I told you this last time. It might have been the time before, but if I was your governor or mayor or whatever it is, I would immediately change my messaging on Las Vegas from, Sin City or whatever it's called to stay entertained. I would make it the move here or work from home anywhere market, because I think the one thing you're seeing now, this absorption, is out of state buyers going, I give up on New York, on California, on wherever. I'm going to go enjoy Summerlin or Green Valley, and their quality of life is going to be much better. And they're going to be able to save money. I can't believe a 2-bedroom, 1-bath in New York goes for $4,200. You know what? You can get a mortgage, like
right.
a $3,500 mortgage buys you in Vegas. That's a mansion, man.
I literally was just in the best part of town yesterday, brand new home by Pulte, 3,600 square feet in the best part of Las Vegas. And yeah, 3,600 square feet, brand new, never lived in. And that's what your mortgage is looking like. 3-car garage, 3,600 square feet, brand new, choose anything you want. And yeah.
Well,
so yeah, I mean,
yeah, let's put up your phone number or however you want people to get a hold of you. I'm hoping people are watching my channel thinking about going to Vegas, and I want them to call you and put some money in your pocket as a thank you for this. So how do you want them to get a hold of you?
Thanks. Call, text 702-257-LEBO. Yeah. 257-LEBO, L-E-B-O.
You're the man. So let's keep on that topic. The other thing that I'm seeing in my market, and I think you're seeing it in Vegas, is right now predominantly buyers are owner occupant, right? The investor buyer, a lot more cautious. Is that a fair assessment?
Okay, repeat that again.
What I'm seeing in my market of Fresno, California, what I think you're seeing in Vegas is the predominant of the buyers are owner occupants.
Oh, yeah. Part of that has been like that in Las Vegas for some time. And the reason is that when you break down cap rates, for your listeners that don't understand cap rates, it's a very simple model to determine how viable an investment is. So it's, your cost basis divided by the income generated by that investment. So a sophisticated investor is going to say, hey, what's the cap rate? And the truth of the matter is that the cap rates in Las Vegas have been deplorable for a very long time. You really got to pick your spots. And then it also depends on, long-term versus short-term cash flow. But it hasn't been the most investor-friendly place for a few years, because for a long time, again, you could throw a stone in the ocean and you're going to find a great cap rate no matter what you purchase. Just buy anything. Now, it requires a lot more skill and tactic to determine where, predicated on that business model. So investors have shied away from Vegas for some time. I still have a bunch of investors that are doing it. We just have to be very creative about the areas and the type of properties that we're purchasing. But owner occupied,
just off the charts,
just through the roof. And again, I was at Pulte yesterday, and to give you an idea from a national level, what they're doing is, my clients wanted like a specific lot, and normally, first come, first serve. What they're doing is essentially a blind bid. They'll come out and say, hey, we're releasing 4 lots. This lot's 30,000, this lot's 60,000. And then you put in a blind bid and say, I'm willing to pay $10,000 over what you're asking for it.
Wow.
And then they go around driving the price up, and the chips fall where they may. Wow. So, that kind of gives you an idea of how arrogant the builders are able to be right now. That's not really the best system. No one likes that type of a system, but they're going to do it because they can get away with it, and it's just business. Yeah, it's business.
Yeah, the thing on the investor front is there will be a time when investors come back in, and that could be as soon as next year or the year after, right? Because again, the reality of Vegas is it's still roughly 20% unemployment. The Strip is still not necessarily shut down, but running on, I don't know, partial capacity. Vegas isn't Vegas yet, and Vegas won't be Vegas for 6 months, a year. Who knows, right?
It's going to be some time. A lot of the shows have closed down. I don't know if you saw Le Rev. It's the #1 show in Las Vegas, and Le Rev had to shut down. That affected people close to me personally who worked in the show. And how does the #1 show consistently, it's been like 9 years in a row, how does that shut down? So that kind of gives you an indication, on how bearish things are looking in some aspects. I personally haven't been to the Strip in many, many months, but my clients that were just in town, they said, wow, The strip
Yeah.
looks totally different, the clientele, because, they're giving rooms away. So obviously they're giving rooms away because the higher end clientele aren't coming.
Yeah.
So it's all the way around. It's a trickle down effect that even when we do have butts and seats, it's not the same level of caliber of butts that we had before that aren't spending the same type of money. So
Yeah.
in some ways it's kind of good because a lot of the businesses are having to get creative. A lot of the nightclub industry is really being creative on how they can generate income, and they're actually doing okay, but it's almost like hitting a really hard reset. Instead of paying these DJs $100,000 an appearance, they're paying these guys $500 for some local Vegas DJ.
Right. Yeah.
And so they're not generating the revenue, but they're also not
controlling costs,
spending. Yeah, exactly. So what Vegas is going to look like after is going to be really, really interesting, because can you get away with not spending $100,000 on DJs, and maybe we go down to 20,000, and now the door entry fees come down.
Yep.
So
yeah, I think I mean, going all the way back to your and I's first discussion, I believe at some point Vegas will be a highly investable market, like for investors. I think we're not there yet. Clearly, based on the numbers, you can't be an investable market when you're sitting peak for median prices.
Right.
That doesn't happen usually.
Right.
But it's coming. That's why we're going to keep talking. I do think it's an owner-occupied market right now. Go ahead.
So we can definitely go into a rabbit hole on this.
Sure.
And it has less to do with Vegas, but more for your show on a national level. And so there's something I've been kicking around in my head that I would love to challenge you to really, really, when you go work out, when we're done with this, I want you to work out and wrap your brain around this concept. So I was having this existential conversation with a friend about a week ago, and we were I started talking about how I see the future of, cars and this and this and this, right?
Okay.
And the more I started talking, and then considering where we're at in the pandemic and so many people working from home, I just had this really bizarre moment of clarity where consider a few things that we're talking 5-10 years down the pipeline, but for investors, it means right now could be some fantastic opportunities on a national level.
Okay.
So when you think of two things, one, how did suburbia even begin? Suburbia began because when the veterans came back from the war and they were able to access cheap homes, and we had vehicles, because of the advent of the vehicle, and then more importantly, the highway system, we were able to spread people out into the suburbs, which offered a better quality of life, and you could still commute into the city, right? Yeah. That's how the suburbs were invented, and that was predicated on the advent of transportation and infrastructure.
Okay.
What no one has talked about, I've never heard anyone talk about this, and I'm sure I'm not the first, but I just haven't heard anyone, is consider, because we've always said, what's going to happen after COVID, right?
Yeah.
So the unintended consequences are we're finding out that productivity is at, if not better, with people working at home.
Yeah.
If you're a business, well, I don't need 20 floors in a building now. Maybe I can go down to 2 floors and then have everyone work from home.
Yeah.
Now, as we've discussed, there's this migration pattern where people are leaving the city and flocking towards the suburbs. Yeah. This should be affecting your area with people from San Francisco going, why am I paying this rent when I can work from home? And if I'm going to work from home, I might as well live someplace cheaper. Well, wrap your head around the consideration of this.
Okay.
I'm a huge car guy, and I've got 2 Teslas, right? 2 of the cars I have are Teslas. So having experienced having a Tesla, it's life-changing because it just does things that other vehicles don't. And I've got very nice cars that do very nice things, but nothing like a Tesla. Self-driving is just the most underrated technology. So when you grasp the concept of self-driving vehicles, you also have to go, where do self-driving vehicles go? And like Elon said, let's get rid of steering wheels. If we get rid of steering wheels, what do you care how a car drives or handles when you're not driving anymore? We're all passengers. So basically your dream vehicle becomes more of the old school VW microbus, right? Yeah. If you're going to be in a self-driving vehicle, I want space. So now wrap your head around the fact that if 10, 20 years from now, we're all just floating around in our personal little bubbles being driven by artificial intelligent technology.
Okay.
Doesn't that make commuting a lot more desirable? Because
Yeah.
Think about it. Like, how many people in LA have 2-hour drives to work?
Well,
Okay.
too many.
And it's miserable. It's time consuming. So there's an opportunity cost in a lot of cities where I still would rather live close to the city because I can't deal with that long of a commute where other people do.
Right.
It's not uncommon for people to live in Connecticut and take the train for 2 hours to New York every
You're right.
day.
You're right.
So when you think about that, think about California. Think about the fact that maybe if I have to go into the office only once a week into LA, maybe I could live at the border of Nevada and California.
Absolutely.
Because if I don't have to drive, I just have my self-driving car. Who cares if it's a 2.5-hour drive? Because I'm not really output anything.
Yeah, you're on a conference call anyway. What's it matter?
Right. So kind of think from an investment standpoint in all of these peripheral suburban places. What kind of an effect can that have on remote areas that now are super, super cheap, but it's just too far from everything?
Yeah.
But once you have self-driving cars, you can spread people even further because you don't actually have to have the stress of driving. So it's just one of those things I've been thinking about.
No, I think you're onto something. I think what you and I call the suburbs today, given this idea, I think evolves even more. I think cities, I think one thing that we're going to learn in this pandemic is vertical cities lose. Offices, retail, rent. I mean, if you're a landlord in a big skyscraper, I feel for you. Rents are going to go down. We've seen them double digits already. Vacancies are up, 3 months rent. Oh, by the way, the freaking regulation that's coming, you have something in Vegas you just talked about, these new stipulations or whatever you're calling are coming left, right, and center. It's a tough time to be a landlord in a big city, but if you're in suburbia, people want space. I have never had such high demand for my rental houses that I've had in the last couple of months because space is good.
Right. And you also have to remember, as we move, you and I, we're getting old. We're like becoming irrelevant. There's a whole generation of kids. I mean, think about it. When we were kids, I started counting down from 14 to get my driver's license. And now there's kids that are 18 that don't even want to drive.
Yeah, my daughter didn't get it until she was 19. You're right.
Yeah. So think about this. I mean, to you and I, the idea of working through a conference call and the fact that we're doing this, it's still weird a little bit. Like we're wrapping our heads around it, but it's weird. There's an entire generation of kids who didn't actually play with their friends. They do everything online. This is second nature to them. This is comfortable to them. So, you know what I mean? Like, you kind of have to look at the fact that culture itself is drastically changing. And then when you multiply that with the pandemic, it makes a lot of sense that city life is relatively doomed because this generation cares less about human interaction in the conventional sense as opposed to the digital interaction. So I think suburbia only actually becomes more and more desirable as time goes by because
you've nailed one of my number one thesis for 2020, the decade of 2020. Space is good. Suburbia is good. Out of the big cities. Big cities will be cheaper in 10 years than they are today, both for rent and prices. So, and you're just helping me see the future. So I appreciate you.
Yeah, like I said, don't want to go down the rabbit hole, but I just want to challenge you with.
I'm going to do it.
Kind of thinking about what self-driving cars are going to do as far as that sprawl of suburbia and extending suburbia. Because once you take that obstacle out of the equation, we can multitask in the car. You can get your work done in the car as you're going to that office. You can get ready and do your hair. There's things that can be done by multitasking instead of you having to focus on one task at hand.
Yeah. Very cool, man. So Bryan, do me a favor, give your phone number one more time. Let's make it ring with people buying houses in Vegas.
Cool. 702-257-LEBO, LEBO, 257-LEBO.
Very cool.
Call, text. Yeah.
Very cool, man. Thanks for your time. Let's see if Vegas sets a record next month.
Sounds good. Thanks again. I appreciate your time. Talk to you soon.
Yep.